morning and happy Election Day. I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. Right now on Morning News Now, Decision Day is finally here. This morning, polls opening up across the country for the midterm elections. And Democrats and Republicans are making their final pitch for your vote.
We know in our bones that our democracy is at risk, and we know that this is your moment to defend it. Preserve it, protect it, choose it.
And if you want to stop the destruction of our country and save the American dream, you must vote Republican in a giant red wave that we've all been hearing about.
Plus, former President Donald Trump hinting at a potential run in 2024, how it could impact the outcome of today's biggest races. Plus, a ballot battle brewing in battleground Pennsylvania, why Democrats, including Senate candidate John Fetterman, are already filing suit. We have team coverage this morning. Also this morning, mixed messages on the war in Ukraine as Russia pushes back against reports of major casualties after an attack in Eastern Europe. What we're learning from a letter believed to be from an elite Russian Marine group. And Scroll Stopper, why more people are choosing to put down their phones, plus tips on how to break an addiction to social media. Something we can all use maybe on a day like today.
Or maybe not today.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe
we'll all be looking at our phones no matter what. As you know, at home, it is Election Day in America. Thank you for being with us this morning. Now, after a final push for votes, it's time for your voice to be heard, and the stakes could not be higher.
With Democrats holding a slight edge in the House and with a 50-50 split in the Senate, control of Congress is up for grabs. Leading candidates and party heavyweights spent the last full day of campaigning yesterday in a last-minute blitz to get out the vote. A new NBC News poll shows Democrats have pulled even with Republicans when it comes to voter interest. 73% of respondents from both parties say they are eager to cast their ballots. Republicans had a 9-point enthusiasm advantage just a month ago. And with razor-thin contests from coast to coast, it's all going to come down to turnout. We have team coverage following all the key races and developments for you this morning. NBC News correspondent Lindsay Reiser is tracking the race for governor in New York. Spotlight PA government reporter Kate Huanpu is following the races in Pennsylvania. But we are going to start with NBC News senior political editor Mark Murray, who's on set here with us. He doesn't know this yet, but we have superglued him to that chair.
Yeah, basically, yeah. We promised yesterday.
Let me out.
Yeah, exactly. So you'll be saying that in about 24 hours. All right, so we've been talking about this early turnout. It's nearly 45 million ballots cast so far nationwide early, far more than we saw in 2018. Does that benefit one party more than another? And then what can we expect as far as actual turnout today at the polls?
We are bracing for unprecedented midterm turnout. Voters are fired up. And yes, we have actually seen more early vote that we've actually had for a previous midterm election. Not quite the 2020 level, but of course that's a presidential contest. And disproportionately, the early voters are Democratic voters. Election day voters are disproportionately Republicans. And how that yin and yang kind of comes out. There are going to be some states that we're going to find out they're going to release the early vote first. There's some states that actually release the election day first. And so you're going to have to go through Chuck Todd, Steve Kornacki, and the great people at our decision desk to kind of wave through the different tranches of data that we're going to see throughout election night.
Also, sort of in the same vein, when we talk about this potential for showing up, Joe mentions enthusiasm, how it seems to have sort of leveled out after Republicans had this advantage. You know, the party in the White House often has an uphill battle, but we have seen this spike in Democratic enthusiasm. What does that mean you're looking out for in terms of those numbers there?
Yeah, Savannah, potential uncertainty. I mean, those of us who've covered midterm races in the past kind of expect this, like, well, this is not going to be a great Democratic year. The president's approval rating is at 44%. People think the country's headed in the wrong direction. But as you ended up mentioning, we do see that spike in Democratic enthusiasm. And even in the 2018 midterms, which was a really good year for Democrats, Republicans held their own with the polarization. You saw them fired up just as well. And so that polarization where everybody's kind of in their camps, you normally don't have the big red waves or blue waves we've seen in past midterm cycles when the party in power is just as fired up as the opposition is.
So when it comes to control of Congress, specifically control of the Senate, there are these major battlegrounds we're following. Top of mind, you've got Georgia, Pennsylvania, Nevada. Maybe those are the big three. Also keeping an eye on Ohio and Arizona. This time tomorrow, or maybe even Thursday, what do you think could be the state that we are looking at that could actually determine who controls the Senate?
I think Pennsylvania, and it might take us a few days to kind of settle who ends up winning that contest. But for Democrats to hold on control of the U.S. Senate, they need to flip the Pennsylvania seat. That is currently a Republican-held seat. Pat Toomey is retiring. And if Democrats are able to win that, then that puts pressure on Republicans. And then they have to win in Nevada and in Georgia to take control of the U.S. Senate. So to me, Pennsylvania is the whole ball game. But really, that shorthand, there are really 3 Senate seats to watch over the next few days. And that's going to be Nevada, Georgia, and Pennsylvania. And the party that wins 2 of those 3 will most likely end up controlling the U.S. Senate. And do remember, Georgia, if no one cracks 50%, goes to a runoff in December.
Yeah, which is what we saw before. I asked you your hottest take talking before the show. You said Pennsylvania, that's the one. There we go. We'll keep an eye on it. Joe just mentioned this. Maybe it'll be Thursday morning that we're still talking about this, still waiting on results. What do you anticipate? Because so many of these races are so tight in terms of when we will have answers. And also remind us what this has looked like in midterms past.
Yeah, I'm expecting a very long week ahead of us. And you should do the midterms last, the last presidential contest, we didn't find out until the Saturday after Election Day that Joe Biden had been projected to be the winner of that presidential contest. It has taken a while to count mail-in ballots, and some states like Pennsylvania and Wisconsin don't allow you to start processing mail-in ballots until Election Day, which is why it sometimes takes a while to do it. But other states like Arizona has just notoriously been a very slow state to count. And even in 2018, when Kyrsten Sinema ended up winning that Senate contest and Joe Biden winning that in the presidential race, those were, at the end of the day, 2 percentage point victories, but it took 3, 4, 5, 6 days to be able to count. And so the guidance that we've been kind of shouting from the mountaintops here at NBC News is like, it's Election Day, but let's get ready for Election Week as well.
Yeah, all right. Absolutely. In Nevada, I think they're already warning 10 days maybe. All right. Yeah. Thanks, Mark. As we said yesterday, we'll be seeing a lot of you. We really appreciate you being with us this morning. All right. Let's now go to Pennsylvania. Mark Murray's hottest take. NBC News correspondent Maura Barrett and Kate Whampoa, who's the government reporter for Spotlight Pennsylvania, are both there to report for us. Maura, I will begin with you. Good to see you with us. So 2 big races there. One for the Senate, so one we were just talking about between Oz and Fetterman, also one for governor. The big news today, though, let's start with this breaking news. Democrats are filing a lawsuit demanding that undated or incorrectly dated mail-in ballots actually be counted. Maura, explain to us how this lawsuit came to be and what Democrats are arguing.
Well, Savannah, back in 2020, we saw a plethora of lawsuits here in Pennsylvania, and we were expecting the same this year, but maybe not so soon. Democrats filing this suit last night, upset about the fact that these mail-in ballots might not be counted. To give you some context here, the Pennsylvania State Supreme Court had seen a challenge about these ballots, questions over whether counting undated or incorrectly dated ballots qualified as violating federal law. The Supreme Court was evenly divided on this, and so they told counties to set those ballots aside and not count them for now. Democrats and other civil rights groups like the ACLU are arguing that this could disenfranchise certain voter groups. And this is something that the state has encouraged counties to let voters know if they fall into that bucket of undated or incorrectly dated ballots, to give them the opportunity to come back, fix their mail-in ballot, make sure that it's counted come processing once Election Day closes here today. And so that's something you might be wondering, how many votes is that? It could be a couple thousand votes, but at the end of the day, this is very important for some campaigns like the Democrats, because Democrats lean towards those mail-in ballots. And just a reminder, in both 2016 and 2020, Pennsylvania came down to less than 1% of the voter population. So those that small fraction of mail-in ballots that are being set aside could really matter, Savannah.
Absolutely. Kate, let's bring you in here on the same topic, because I know you reported extensively last week about mail-in voting, what it ultimately means for counting ballots following the election. Now here we've got this lawsuit. As Maura just mentioned, we know Democrats tend to favor those mail-in votes. Explain to us where these ballots are coming from in the state of Pennsylvania and what this means in terms of how long it could take for this vote to be counted.
Yeah, by and large, they're coming from the 2 sort of big cities of Pennsylvania, either Allegheny County, which is where Pittsburgh is, or Philadelphia County, which is where Philly is. They're also sort of coming from the smaller regional cities like Scranton, Wilkes-Barre, Erie, and the collar counties surrounding those 2 big cities.
Absolutely. Maura, all right, now let's get to the good stuff this morning. Polls are open in Pennsylvania. It's expected to be a close race, of course, on this Senate race. John Fetterman and Mehmet Oz. What can we expect from the candidates today, and what are you seeing as polls are open?
Well, voters were just let into the polling place behind me here in Montgomery County, but it is that Senate race that has kept all of us on the edge of our seats. You heard Mark Murray talking about how important this Pennsylvania Senate race is. Fetterman and Oz in a statistical dead heat when we look at polling. And so it really is going to come down to turnout here. And when I'm checking in with the campaigns, the Democrats are really focusing on and letting us know, we might see a Republican lead from the in-person voting, today, but they are really going to be waiting for that mail-in turnout. Now, in terms of last-minute activations, we saw campaigns across the state holding Get Out the Vote rallies to encourage voters to get out in person today. Text messages are flying to all Pennsylvania voters, both Fetterman and Oz, putting out their closing argument ads yesterday, as well as they're all over social media. Fetterman's expected to have his victory party over in Western Pennsylvania tonight, while Oz will be here in Montgomery County. We are waiting at the polling place where Democratic gubernatorial candidate Josh Shapiro is set to be voting in the next hour. So it is certain to be a busy day of voting, and we will continue watching to see how the results for this Senate race shake out, Savannah.
Yeah, Kate, let's talk about that particular voter and his race for governor. So polls show Democrat Josh Shapiro with a sizable lead over Republican Doug Mastriano. Let's talk about why this race has been closely watched in this state in particular. Now, we know governor races in general. I mean, it's important when you think about the certification of elections, which obviously has become quite a bit of conversation since 2020. It's going to be a big storyline in terms of abortion in certain states. Walk us through this particular race in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I think you listed some of the biggest reasons. In 2020, Pennsylvania was a key state when certifying the election for Joe Biden. That's definitely a factor coming up on 2024. And again, abortion is a huge issue here and really has caused a huge spike in registration, especially in female voters in the state. And Mastriano and Shapiro are offering two extremely different views on that. Mastriano has said he would be okay with a total ban with no exception for rape, abortion, or the life of the mother, where Shapiro is definitely more of the centrist lane. He said he would protect abortion rights as they stand in Pennsylvania.
And Kate, is that right there one of the biggest sort of attack lines we've seen between the two of them in campaigns?
Oh, certainly. In both elections, both Senate and governor, you can see attack ads the world over about both Oz and Mastriano's lines on abortion just being repeated.
Kate, thank you so much. Maura, thank you so much. We are watching as Pennsylvania polls are now open on this election day.
And it's not just swing states like Pennsylvania that are seeing some contests that might be too close for comfort. President Biden actually spent part of Sunday in the Democratic stronghold of New York. Even though registered Democrats outnumber Republicans more than 2-1, the state's governor, Kathy Hochul, is facing a serious challenge from Republican Congressman Lee Zeldin. For more on this, we're joined by MSNBC anchor Lindsay Reiser, who's in Cold Spring, New York this morning. Lindsay, good to have you with us. So for a bit of context here, New York has not seen a Republican governor since George Pataki. That was nearly 2 decades ago. We know Republicans now really focusing on crime, the economy to try and get through to voters. So is that what's behind this tight race between the two? Take us through how we got here.
Yeah, what a turn of events. Joe, good to be with you. It's about the issues that are mattering to voters. It's about the money that's being poured into some of these races. So let's focus on New York governor first. Kathy Hochul, Lee Zeldin. Kathy Hochul has been enjoying wide margins in this race until recently. In fact, in October, Quinnipiac poll only put her at 4 points above Zeldin. Her fundraising has been extraordinary, breaking a state record. She's pulled in nearly $49 million. But lately, Lee Zeldin has been getting a lot of help from Republican super PACs. He's endorsed by Trump, and his contributions of late have been just extraordinary. He's been hammering home on the airwaves crime, inflation. We do know crime numbers, even though felonies are down, homicides are down year to year. According to the NYPD, overall crime is up about 6%. That's mostly being driven by grand theft auto. And we know that a lot of people behind the scenes have been pushing Hochul to talk about what she's doing to reduce crime that people are feeling, especially in the city, talking about cameras on the subways, more law enforcement presence. But, Joe, as you mentioned, it would be an incredible turn of events here if that governor's mansion in Albany were to turn red, and certainly a race that's so close we're all going to be watching very closely today.
Yeah, and to be clear, Lindsay, it's not just Governor Hochul who's facing stiff competition in New York today. A top House Democrat is also locked in a very tight race of his own. Explain to us what's going on there.
Sean Patrick Maloney, he is right now the highest seated Democrat to be in a vulnerable seat. He was elected in 2012 to Congress. He's the head of the DCCC. He is in charge of that campaign arm, making sure that Democrats keep the House. But his own seat right now is vulnerable. New York Assemblyman Mike Lawler has proven to be a formidable opponent. At first, a lot of the fundraising that they were doing here was kind of considered a joke, but now it is really, he's really become a contender, again, focusing on crime, focusing on inflation, what people are spending at the grocery store. Sean Patrick Maloney has been talking about voting rights, reproductive rights, and he was on Meet the Press on Sunday with Chuck Todd, and he said he has to go out and fight every 2 years for this seat to earn it. It's not like in years past, this has been a cakewalk for him, but this year there has been redistricting. He is introducing himself to a lot of constituents, and he'll be voting later today. We'll catch up with him, ask him a few questions, and also hopefully catch up with Lawler later today too, Joe.
I mean, so Lindsay, just overall, what is it Democrats are saying about the fact that they are playing defense in what's historically a deep blue state? How much does that concern them?
So there's been a lot of talk behind the scenes of worries about, was there mixed messaging? Should they have focused earlier on inflation and crime as opposed to reproductive rights? Of course, when you ask people, again, Sean Patrick Maloney on Meet the Press saying, look, we don't know the results yet. We don't know if it's bad messaging or what's resonating with voters. But certainly, if you look at the fundraising, Joe, if you look at, you had mentioned President Biden coming here on that crucial weekend before the election to stump for Kathy Hochul and other Democrats here, it really shows how much these races are in play and the effects down ballot they could have as well. There are some competitive races in Long Island for Congress, and also the New York Assembly Democrats in danger of losing their veto-proof supermajority this race, Joe.
Lindsay Reiser following some surprisingly close races in New York. Lindsay, thanks.
Now to battleground Georgia, where incumbent Democratic Senator Raphael Warnock is facing off against Republican challenger Herschel Walker in a fiercely competitive race. The latest polling data actually shows the candidates are neck and neck, and a record-breaking 2.5 million people have already voted early in the state of Georgia, which is where you find NBC News national correspondent Gabe Gutierrez. He's in Atlanta. Hey, Gabe, good morning. So this has become this incredibly tight race in recent weeks, and it has seen its fair share of drama. First, just tell us where we're at right now. We heard from both candidates. We saw them make their final campaign push last night. What did they say?
Yes, Savannah, both candidates searching for every last vote. And first, I want to take a live look, though, at the folks that have showed up to vote here. Polls opening just a short time ago, minutes ago, and a line started forming even before the polls opened. Several dozen people have been waiting in line. We just saw a few of them go inside right now, but still a small line outside of this polling place in Atlanta. Now, as you mentioned, this is a tight contest between football legend Herschel Walker, who was denied allegations during the campaign that he paid for 2 women's abortions, and he's tried to link incumbent Senator Raphael Warnock to President Biden and rising inflation. Now, Warnock, a minister, has slammed Walker as unfit for office and a pathological liar. And as you said, with control of the U.S. Senate hanging in the balance, more than $250 million has already poured into this race. And Savannah, there is a third-party candidate here, and in Georgia, if no candidate reaches that 50% threshold, that means that this all goes to a runoff next month. So this might not be over tonight or even this week, Savannah.
Yeah, we might be doing this all again in a matter of 4 weeks or so. Gabe, let's talk now, of course, about what's important here, what's ultimately going to make the decision, and that's the voters. What are you hearing from voters on the ground about this race in particular? There was so much question, so much speculation about if the allegations against Herschel Walker would change anyone's mind. What are some of the biggest issues and the biggest takeaways from that?
Well, certainly, Savannah, and there are several key demographics here, and the question will be which way these groups go in this election. Of course, suburban women, the youth voters, young people, who they will vote for, or whether they will turn out at all. I spoke with several folks on both sides of the aisle yesterday. Take a listen to what they had to say.
I believe in Herschel, and we need to get the economy back where it should be, and I think he'd make the best one. You go to the grocery store and you don't have, you just spend so much money in gas, and I just feel sorry for people that don't have money to make a living.
And you blame President Biden for that?
Oh, yes, I do, 100%.
Why are you supporting Senator Warnock?
I'm a Democrat, and first of all, his intelligence level is off the chart. And I think he's a good person to be in the Senate. You're always going to blame the person in power to get in power yourself. So Biden is doing a very good job working with the people around him for the United States of America. There's a lot of things happening in America right now. And it's not necessarily the economy here. Inflation is all around the globe.
So Republican voters, many of them telling me that their top issue this election cycle is the economy. Other Democrat voters that I spoke with said that it was reproductive rights, as well as threats to democracy that were really driving their vote. Again, voters here already going to the polls here in Georgia. The polls stay open until 7 p.m. Eastern time tonight.
Absolutely. Gabe, also, I mentioned the interest in this particular state in voting early and absentee voting, 2.5 million people voting early. I know also, though, now that the state has launched an investigation into absentee ballots that were not mailed to voters. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, Savannah, another example of how every vote counts here, and especially in such a tight race. But Cobb County, which is a county, suburban Atlanta, essentially, the state has launched an investigation as to how more than 1,000 ballots were not mailed in time, basically. The ACLU had filed a lawsuit saying more than 1,000 ballots had not been mailed in time by mail to voters who had requested them. And several hundred of those voters ended up voting in person, but there were still several hundred others that did not get those ballots in a timely fashion. So there's some question about whether they would be able to get the ballots in by today. By the way, Savannah, Georgia is one of those states, and in some other parts of the country, you need to have your ballot postmarked by Election Day. Here, it needs to be received by Election Day, and there was some concern that the ballots would not be able to be received. So now a judge has extended the deadline for those several hundred ballots in Cobb County, absentee ballots, to be counted until next week. But again, another example of just how much every vote counts in this especially tight race in Georgia.
Absolutely. One of the big three that we are watching, according to Mark Murray, and you will keep an eye on it for us. Gabe, thanks so much.
To Arizona we go, and if we're going to Arizona, that means we're going to NBC News correspondent Vaughn Hilliard. Two closely watched races there. So let's start, Vaughn, with the Senate race. You've got the Democratic Senator Mark Kelly, who just won a special election 2 years ago. His challenger is Blake Masters. They both made their final push to voters yesterday. What are their closing messages?
Yeah, good morning, you guys. This is major. I mean, if Blake Masters upsets Mark Kelly in this race, and we should know Blake Masters has consistently been down in polling ever since he won his August primary. If he wins, it could shift the balance of power in the U.S. Senate. I want to let you hear directly from both candidates, though, yesterday on the campaign trail.
And right now, we face some pretty serious challenges, like drought and rising costs. And my opponent, he's proven that he's not up to the task. And I think, frankly, Arizonans can't afford him or his dangerous beliefs in the United States Senate.
After just 20 months, our backs are against the wall here. We can't take much more of Biden-Harris. We can't take much more of Mark Kelly just rubber stamping their demented agenda. I really feel like this is a save-the-country election. Do you agree?
Masters is heavily focused on an economic pitch as well as border security. And Kelly there has talked about a myriad of issues, but he is also heavily focused on women's reproductive rights as well as the threats the Republican posed to the election process. This is a moment here where in a longtime conservative state, Democrats are trying to win a U.S. Senate seat for the third cycle in a row, which would be significant here, again, in this longtime conservative state.
So, Vaughn, you mentioned the election process. That might be the key issue in the governor's race, which is getting so much attention. Carrie Lake is one of many Republicans this election cycle who's echoed former President Trump's claims the 2020 election was rigged, which we know is false. But how is that resonating with voters?
Right. She has been at the forefront of this effort, propagating these 2020 election conspiracy theories, and she has made it a key part of her campaign, not only during her primary, but also just last night up on stage, previewing what she says is a reason for her to be worried about what was to come today. Take a listen to her last night.
And these back there don't want us talking about stolen elections. Well, it doesn't matter what they attempt tomorrow because we're going to show up like our lives depend on it. And there's not a darn thing that Katie Hobbs can screw up tomorrow to make our win any less significant.
Of course, this is the same Republican candidate who you'll recall in the primary suggested that there were signs of fraud and irregularities, but never provided any evidence of it, and then went quiet after she won that primary. And as you just heard last night, she's suggesting the same thing now, but again, providing no specific evidence or any specific allegations of actual fraud or rigging of this election.
And so, Yvonne, I quickly want to ask you about Maricopa County, because it's getting a lot of attention over misinformation surrounding midterms, increased threats to election workers, voter intimidation. Real quick, what's the county doing to try and ensure safety today?
Right. This was the county that was at the epicenter of the scrutiny, the audits, and the conspiracies of the 2020 election. We've seen voter intimidation at these ballot drop box locations. The Maricopa County Sheriff's just last night said that the office is not only setting up fencing and barbed wire around the tabulation center. This is the building where the ballots are being processed and counted, but they've also positioned deputies around this particular building because of the threats made against election workers.
All right, Yvonne Hilliard in Arizona. Yvonne, thank you so much. And stick with NBC News Now today. Be sure to tune in tonight for our special election night coverage starting at 6 p.m. Eastern with live results and analysis beginning then at 8. And of course, we will have continuing coverage tomorrow morning right here on Morning News Now.
That is right. Now this morning we're tracking subtropical storm Nicole.
Meteorologist Michelle Grossman joins us with that. Hey, Michelle, good morning.
Hey there, guys. Great to see you. Yeah, we're tracking the tropics. They are active right now. Subtropical storm Nicole is expected to strengthen into a tropical storm later today and could become a hurricane as it nears the northwestern parts of the Bahamas. So here is the latest on Nicole, because we are looking at winds strengthened since the last advisories, 50 miles per hour. It's moving northwest at 8 miles per hour. The location is 380 miles east-northeast of the northwestern Bahamas, and that's where we expect to see the brunt of the storm later on tonight into Wednesday, and then later Wednesday impacting the state of Florida into Thursday. So we do have tropical alerts where you see the red. That is a hurricane warning. That is for most of the Bahamas, the northwestern parts of the Bahamas. We also have a tropical storm warning, but you can see Florida with tropical alerts as well into the coastal portions of Georgia. And we are talking major impacts as we go throughout the next couple of days. So here's the forecast track. We're looking at strong winds impacting Florida by tomorrow morning. Where you see this orange coloring, that is the tropical storm force wind. So it's well outside of the cone. And as we go throughout time here, you're going to see this track impacting portions of Florida as we go throughout tomorrow morning. And then we do expect landfall early Thursday morning as a Category 1 storm. That has been updated as well. So we will watch that very, very closely. We're expecting storm surge, very heavy rainfall, and some damaging winds that could cause some power outages. It's going to take a right-hand turn due to an area of high pressure off the coast, and it's going to go up the east coast. So we're going to see heavy rain impacting anywhere from the Carolinas into portions of the Northeast Friday and also Saturday. We could see up to 7 inches of rain. That's one of the major impacts, especially in portions of Florida where we're so heavily impacted by Ian. We're looking at more rain there, flooding of highways, poor drainage areas, and also some small streams could be impacted as well. Then as we go throughout time here, it moves to the northeast. We're looking at heavy downpours late Friday into Saturday. We're also talking about storm surge, guys. This is a big one. This is where we see that wall of water inland, and we're looking at 3 to 5 foot storm surge along the coast of Florida. Back to you.
Right, Michelle, thank you so much.
Thanks, Michelle. Sure.
Coming up on Morning News Now, new developments on the war in Ukraine.
Yeah, we'll tell you about a potentially major blow to Russian forces as the fighting intensifies. We'll be right back.
We're back with the latest developments in the war in Ukraine. Russian officials are pushing back against allegations in a letter believed to come from an elite Marine group that says that they suffered major casualties in an attack in Eastern Europe.
Yeah, the open letter sent to a Russian governor claims the brigade were thrown into a, quote, incomprehensible battle. Joining us now to discuss is NBC News foreign correspondent Molly Hunter. Molly, good to see you. So tell us a little bit about this and what Russian officials are now saying.
Savannah, Joe, good morning to you. I want to be really clear that NBC News has not confirmed this letter. This was an open letter posted by pro-Russian bloggers on Telegram. And as you say, Savannah, it was addressed to a governor in a very small region in the east of the country. Now, the letter says that this Marine unit, this elite Marine unit, suffered incomprehensible losses during this assault. Now, the Russian MOD actually did respond, which is incredibly rare. And the fact that they felt like they needed to deny this and needed to respond is certainly indicative of the fact that they are feeling like they need to kind of lessen the discontent, not only among their troops, but also at home. They said this division did suffer losses, but had not suffered, quote, significant losses. Guys?
So, Molly, of course, it is Election Day here in the U.S. One of the issues that's on the ballot indirectly is the war in Ukraine. And that's because some Republicans have said they would slash military aid if they win power. How concerned are Ukrainians about that possibility?
Absolutely. And you can bet that, capitals from Kyiv to Brussels across Europe are watching very, very closely. And really, the midterms are being seen as kind of a litmus test of foreign aid to Ukraine. We asked the regional governor of the Kyiv region yesterday about this. Take a listen, and I'll talk to you on the backside.
What happens and how does it affect your region if the U.S. scales back aid of all kinds?
This will be a very painful issue for all Ukrainian people because we are receiving so much help from the U.S. right now, and we are very grateful for everything the U.S. does for us. I don't even want to consider what might happen, but I can't say for sure that it won't affect our fighting spirit.
He wouldn't even kind of entertain the possibility if a Republican-controlled Congress, scaled back aid, not just, defense aid, but also humanitarian aid to this country. But certainly they'll be watching very closely, guys.
Molly, also sticking with what's going on here in the U.S. today, Election Day, we have some concerning news here. Yesterday, we heard an admission of election interference from a Russian businessman, also a close ally to Putin. Tell us a little bit about more who this person is, what he said, and how unprecedented it is.
Yeah, Yevgeny Prigozhin is a serious power player. He's often called Putin's chef. He is very close to Putin. He is also the founder and the executive of the Wagner Group. Is it a mercenary fighting force right now? They are fighting in one of the hottest fronts in eastern Ukraine near Bakhmut in the Donbass region. And he posted yesterday on VK, it's the Russian version of Facebook. He says, "We have interfered. We are interfering, and we will continue to interfere carefully, accurately, surgically, and in our own way as we know how to do it. During our pinpoint operations," he continued, "we will remove both kidneys and the liver at once." Now, 4 years ago, Prigozhin was actually indicted along with others for interference in the 2016 elections. That related to a troll farm related to him. But this is someone who stays fairly under the radar, and we have seen him start to speak up much more about the war, actually criticize, although veiled, criticize Russian generals, which is why his Wagner Group has really come into such prominence. And we should mention to you guys, he is under U.S. sanctions already.
All right, Molly Hunter, thank you so much for following the latest there. Stay safe.
More now on what's going on around the world. New headlines coming out of the COP27 Climate Change Summit.
That's right. NBC News foreign correspondent Claudio Lavanga joins us now from Rome with that and more. Hey, Claudio, good to see you.
Good morning. Yes, as you mentioned, at the COP27 Climate Change Summit in Egypt, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said that vulnerable communities in climate hotspots are being blindsided by cascading climate disasters without any means of prior alert. For this reason, the United Nations on Monday has announced a plan to make sure people in developing countries are warned ahead of the time when there is a risk of climate-related hazards like extreme storms and floods. Let's move back here to Italy, where a humanitarian crisis is escalating after the new right-wing government has been trying to stop migrants rescued in the Mediterranean from disembarking. 2 ships run by NGOs have been docked at a port in Sicily where with 35 migrants on board who are not allowed to disembark. Another one carrying 95 migrants has entered Italian waters without permission, while another ship run by SOS Mediterranee remains in international waters of Sicily with 234 rescued people on board. Let's jump over to Wales, where a baby alpaca was born in the middle of a stormy weather. The Manorafon Farm Park in Abergele posted a picture of the cute baby alpaca, very cute, who hasn't been named yet. The farm doesn't even know its gender because it wrote that after the dramatic birth in the middle of a storm, they are giving mommy and baby a little more space before they take a look. That's very cute.
It is. I feel like Al the alpaca is too obvious, right?
I like that.
Okay, we're going with it. Starting the campaign now.
That was a nice little break, too. This morning, we got a lot going on. Nice to look at an alpaca for a moment.
Thanks, Claudio.
Thank you. And coming up, making history even before polls close.
After the break, more on the record number of black Republicans running for office and how it could be impacting voters' choices today. This is Morning News Now. Welcome back. As voters head to the polls, a record number of black Republicans filed to run for office this year.
NBC News Now correspondent Zincle Asamoah spoke to one black candidate and also voters in Texas to learn more about what's motivating them this election season.
We need black excellence everywhere. Republican, Democrat, Independent.
A key Democratic voting bloc, black people, may be turning to the Republican Party.
Because at least we're in the room to at least add some color, if you will.
I met Wesley Hunt at a Trump rally in Robstown, Texas.
That is the America that I know and love.
He's a Republican running for the state's U.S. House District 38 seat, one of a record 178 black Republican candidates running for office in 2022. Black Republicans are not new, but Howard University's Dr. Kenesha Grant says today motivators for black voters are shifting.
And so whereas people would think about race first in the past, they now think about something like the economy first, or they might think about education first, or they might think about religion first.
This does differ by gender, with black men nearly 3 times more likely than black women to have voted for Trump. For black Republicans I spoke with, issues of faith and economy are critical.
I don't believe in homosexuality. I don't support same-sex marriage. I don't support abortion.
Thomas Isbell says religion moved his vote. Chandra, who asked to be identified by her first name, believes Democratic policies keep communities of color, quote, down economically.
The Democrat Party has never really done anything to help.
Still, Dr. Grant says these beliefs come with some reservation.
I think it's important to note that black voters describe themselves as conservative, but they face a barrier when they have to decide what to do with that conservatism.
One study in the University of Chicago Press Journals suggesting black voters are more likely to identify as Democrats around other black voters, even if they are Republican. But candidates like Wesley Hunt, now backed by former President Trump, aren't shy about their beliefs.
I'm mindful that Trump is also supported by white supremacist groups as well.
Yeah.
Some black voters view statements he's made as racist. What do you say?
You know, what I'll say is there's extremism on both sides. What I'm really focused on are actually the policies that are actually going to raise us from the situation that we're in right now.
I know a lot of black voters are focused on it.
Yeah.
Are you worried about them?
People are really having a hard time putting food on their table. That's where the majority of people are focused on right now.
Hunt betting on the economy as a major voter issue.
I think that's why we're going to see a big red wave, particularly when it comes to black and brown people.
It's a bet that could bring major wins or losses.
Our thanks to Zincle Asamoah for that report. Now, of the record 178 black Republicans who filed to run for office this year, 75 made it through their primaries and 29 are in competitive House races.
Latino voters could also play a major role in this year's elections. Candidates in key battleground states hope that critical voting bloc will give them an edge.
That's right. That's because the number of eligible Latino voters is on the rise. 34.5 million Latinos can now cast their ballots, and that number is up by, get this, 4.7 million compared to 2018's midterms.
Let's bring in Juan Rosa for more on this. He is the National Director of Civic Engagement for the National Association of Latino Democratic Officials. Juan, good to have you with us. So first, let's get the broader picture here. Can you tell us exactly how much influence Latino voters are going to have in this year's elections? Are we seeing Latino voters more enthusiastic this year about casting their ballots?
Thank you so much, Joe and Savannah. So a small correction. We are the National Association of Latino Elected and Appointed Officials. Just a small correction. To answer your question, yes, Latino voters are going to be decisive in key races across the country. For example, in states like Colorado, Nevada, and Arizona, the share of Latino voters tend to be well over the difference between the winner and the loser of last elections, right? So, for example, in some states, the margin of victory between one candidate and the other for governor or senator was 4%. And Latino voters in that state average well over more than 10%, right? So we know that Latino voters are going to be decisive in key races, but just nationally, we project that 11.6 million Latinos will vote in these elections.
Absolutely. Juan, I do also want to ask about a concern here. This is misinformation spreading specifically within the Latino community. Advocacy groups have been warning about this. Why and how is this particular population, specifically the targets of these campaigns, and how much of an impact does it seem to have had?
Right. So Latinos are getting their news and information from social media. A lot of them claim that YouTube is a prime source for them to get information about elections and just about every other facet of life. So we know that, one, they are on social media a lot, which makes disinformation and misinformation easier to spread. Latinos also rely on encrypted networks for communication with their family members or their church circles or their professional circles. Those encrypted networks are harder to monitor. So it's not like there's a monitoring effort in place to make sure that mis and disinformation is not being widely shared. So we at the Educational Fund, together with a few partner organizations, have been monitoring for the spread of misinfo and disinfo targeting Latinos. And particularly, Savannah, we're interested in things that affect the operations of elections, right? So the validity of vote by mail, for example, is a prime example of what we're monitoring for. There are efforts to say to Latino voters that vote by mail doesn't count, or that vote by mail is more fraudulent than in-person voting. So we are doing daily monitoring sessions of social media. We have established connections with social media companies to flag sort of egregious incidents of misinfo and disinfo.
All right, Juan Rosa, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And coming up, if you thought taking the SATs was bad, imagine being forced to take them again.
And what might be even worse is the reason why. Up next at Morning News Now, what UPS is saying after dozens of exams flew out of one of their trucks. And no, this is not a bad dream. Stay with us. You've heard the expression, the dog ate my homework. Well, in Texas, some SAT tests have disappeared, and they can't blame the dog.
Yeah, just wait till you hear what they can blame. This happened in El Paso, and a UPS truck carrying those completed tests opened up while driving. It's a nightmare for students, depending on those scores, of course. NBC News correspondent Nyala Charles has more on that story.
Hours upon hours of studying gone in the blink of an eye.
I just saw a bunch of papers everywhere. I had no idea what it was. I didn't think much of it, but I just decided to grab my phone and record it.
Video capturing more than 200 SAT tests flying out of a UPS truck in El Paso, Texas.
I looked and I could see the bubbles.
Some people found the visual funny at first.
My mom, as a joke, was like, oh, they're your PSAT scores.
Until seniors at El Paso High realized it was their SAT Scantrons, sharing the news on social media.
Today, I just found out that they were actually the SAT scores from our school.
The district says the faculty combed the streets collecting those tests. However, 55 weren't recovered, meaning those students may have to sit through that 3-hour test again.
Since the pandemic, many colleges don't require standardized testing, but according to data from the College Board, who runs the SAT, almost 2 million high school seniors still took the test last year.
In a statement, the College Board said they will work with El Paso High School to ensure students can retest as soon as possible. But in the meantime, students' concerns go beyond college admissions.
We have all our information, our identification on the score, and it stinks because our identity is out there right now.
Our thanks to Nyala for that report. Although UPS did not say how the driver lost the test, it has apologized for the mishap. In a statement to NBC News, UPS says that its employees worked to recover as many tests as possible, that the driver's actions in this case were not representative of UPS protocols, and that it has addressed this with him. I'm sure he feels awful.
That helps those students. All right, let's get to some financial headlines. Tesla is seeing its lowest stock numbers in over a year.
CNBC's Bertha Coombs has more on why this might be happening and other financial headlines. Bertha, good morning.
Hey, good morning, Joe and Savannah. We've got shares of Tesla falling to their lowest levels since June of last year. The move coming as CEO Elon Musk devotes attention to his newest company, Twitter. Top tech analyst Gene Munster of Loop Ventures tells CNBC growing losses at Twitter could actually force Musk to sell more of his Tesla stake in order to prop up the country if he can't, or the company rather, if he can't turn the fortunes of the social media platform around. Some big Tesla investors are also expressing frustration about reports that Tesla employees are helping Musk with his efforts at Twitter. Meantime, Airbnb is making changes to how it displays prices on the platform after customers complain that they aren't transparent. Starting next month, guests will be able to see the total price that they're required to pay up front. Airbnb will also prioritize the total price versus the nightly rate in its search algorithm and will launch new pricing and discount tools to help hosts set more competitive prices. Airbnb's CEO says guests should also not have to do unreasonable checkout tasks such as stripping the beds, doing the laundry, or vacuuming, because that's not a vacation. Meantime, Instagram is rolling out new in-app scheduling tools to all professional accounts after testing the features over the last few weeks. It'll allow you to schedule photos, carousels, and reels directly in-app up to 75 days in advance. It doesn't really add anything new, because creators have been able to schedule posts through the Creator Studio since 2020, but it could make it easier for Savannah to manage her content on the go or say on set, as the producer is saying, move on to the next story, Savannah. Not that ever happens.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
I think it's happening right now, though.
75 days. Yeah, we got to go. All right, Bertha, thank you.
Bertha.
And coming up, more people choosing to close their social media and put their phones away.
We'll talk about why that's so hard to break the habit and stop scrolling in our weekly mental health check-in. That's next on Morning News Now.
Welcome back. It's time for our weekly mental health check-in, and we're taking a closer look at how anxiety could keep people from casting their ballots today in this year's midterm election.
Plus, new evidence showing how people adopt extremist views. It could be linked to a more common emotion.
Board-certified psychiatrist Dr. Sue Varma joins us now for more on these headlines. Dr. Varma, good morning. So let's start with that election anxiety on election morning. What are some of the psychological reasons that could keep someone, from casting their vote? Are there ways also to overcome that?
Absolutely. I think a lot of people are feeling overwhelmed. They feel like there's a lot of information out there, but they don't know who to believe or who to trust. They feel like they haven't necessarily done their research sometimes, or if they have done their research, they may have lost trust and faith in their leaders in being able to deliver on the important issues to them. So I would say the most important thing is to talk to people outside your social circle to gather new information, head to trusted resources. I personally had a very interesting experience going on a canvas in Philadelphia this weekend with an organization called Indian American Impact with South Asian women. So we went door to door and talked to people. So I think that if you can talk to people that you respect, that you look up to, but also verify trusted sources, this can help alleviate some of our election anxiety.
On the topic of politics, new research is showing loneliness could actually make someone more vulnerable to extremist views. Walk us through how that happens and if there's anything we can do to protect ourselves or perhaps protect someone in our family or a friend.
Absolutely.
Yes. Something very interesting happens when we're lonely. Our mind begins to look for threat in the environment, and we end up shutting down. We end up focusing on becoming hypervigilant and thinking that doomsday is around the corner. Now, look, the reality is that we have been through so much, and so many horrible things have happened in the last several years, a pandemic to begin with that we never could have imagined. But it's important to decrease that isolation, to connect with people, both like-minded, but also people who have different ways of thinking. Loneliness, when left unchecked, can lead to depression and anxiety, which furthers loneliness and isolation. So we have to break the cycle somewhere.
Absolutely. All right, here's something maybe could help people just putting their phones down altogether. More people are doing this to try to break social media addictions. First, just walk us through, we've got about a minute here, why social media is so addictive, but then also how difficult it can be to try to step away.
The brain reward system responds to social media with dopamine spikes just the way it does to chocolate, to sex, to bungee jumping, to anything that is fun, exciting, novel, pleasurable, challenging, dangerous. And social media has that potential to really suck people in because it offers this parallel universe in a way that has so much connection, novelty, interest. You can learn recipes. You're on there for hair blogs. You're on there for the politics. You're on there for social connection. You're using it to DM and message your friends. So it's a one-stop shopping, and it's very hard to break away. If your life is very much intertwined. In fact, I was saying this weekend to a group of interesting leaders that I was like, we're all connected here because of social media. And yet we're all in some way feels like our lives are being divided and we're being torn apart. So one thing I would say is if you can be very intentional about it, I've done something new, which is setting a timer through your phone, through the Apple iPhone, but a lot of phones have it. And it comes up with a time limit. And then it offers you the choice. It says your 1 hour, let's say, if for the day is over, do you want to continue? Do you want to go in 15-minute increments? Do you want to ignore it for the rest of the day? And I found that a lot of times it makes you question, do I really need to be on this? Is this a necessity? And I would say when you're having dinner with people, put your phone down. It increases trust. It increases the depth in relationships and the depth in conversation that you normally wouldn't have just by the appearance of having a phone. People say, hey, I don't know if I can go deep here.
All right, Dr. Sue Varma, thank you so much.
And stay right here for continuing coverage of Decision 2022. We're going to have full team coverage of all the critical races with results and analysis. Coverage kicks off at 6 o'clock tonight. And, of course, we'll have full coverage tomorrow morning right here on Morning News Now. That does it for this hour of Morning News Now.
But the news continues right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.